been a while. All right, folks, we'll open up with questions for Coach Schiano. Second row left, Ari.
Ari Walshman with the Athletic. Greg, last year you were in a position, you almost became a head coach. I was just wondering, from your standpoint, when they're making a decision to have an interim head coach, you seemed like the logical decision just from the outside. What was your take on the decision making, and did you feel as if this was an opportunity for you to step in here?
Well, whenever you have a situation like this, it's very complex. But when you have leaders like Gene Smith and President Drake, they understand this institution better than anyone. They understand what's needed at the time. So what we have done as a staff, I think, is what's special. Ryan is certainly qualified to do this. Kevin Wilson, myself, and the rest of the staff, guys like Larry Johnson, have done this a long time. We all said we have to step it up. We're missing our leader. We're one down right now, and I think the staff has done that, and I think in turn the players have followed our lead. We have some great leadership, and all that combined, I think, is what's going to allow us to be successful. So I'm looking forward to going out and coaching football again in a game. It's been a while. This has certainly been something that, as much as we've worked to stay focused, when it's people you care about, it's hard.
Greg, when the stuff was happening at Tennessee, we asked you about that, and you said there would be a time to talk about it. I was just wondering, is this the time where you're willing to discuss that and how it went, how it impacted you, and do you feel as if that situation down at Tennessee has impacted your future in any way?
Well, certainly things like that are, those are tough to stomach, but now isn't the time to talk about it. There'll be a time, but now's not the time.
Young man in the blue, fourth row left.
Andy Andrews, Buckeye Grove. Oh, excuse me. How has the scheme changed with Coach Grinch in the secondary?
Well, first off, we're really blessed to have him here. He's a tremendous coach. He's a guy that brings great energy to our staff, and he's a man that's led a defense, a very successful defense. So he's a great addition. Excuse me. He certainly brought some fine ideas. When you put a defensive package together, there's a couple things you have to take into account. You have your philosophy as a program, so it has to fit into the philosophy of the program. Then you have to look at your personnel and say, now how can we, with the personnel we have, carry out the vision of the head football coach? And as one side of the ball, that's our job. And Alex has been a huge part of every year you recreate it because your personnel changes.
Front row right, Bill.
Greg, could you kind of go through some of the position battles on defense? Who's going to line up at linebacker? Who's going to be the safety opposite Jordan Fuller?
Gladly. One of the things about our linebacker group, because you mentioned that first, we feel really fortunate that we have great depth. Now, what's happened in the competition in the spring and then into training camp, the guys that will start the game are going to be Pete Werner, Baron Browning, and Malik Harrison. From there, I think more people will play. Now, generally, we have not done that, right? We've rotated the defensive line. We haven't done that at the linebacker position. I'm not sure we're going to do that full scale like we do with the D-line every game, but we're going to see more people play. I think two guys that are coming off surgeries, right? Tuff Borland and Dante Booker. Those guys, as they get to be more and more game ready, they're going to need some reps. So it's an interesting situation at that position, but one we're excited about. It's not one, sometimes they say, well, if you don't have your starters, then you don't have starters. I don't agree. I think we have more than 3 starting quality linebackers. So we're going to play the guys that we think. And the other thing you do is packages. So you try to utilize the talents of your guys. So we have different packages and different situational football that will allow certain guys to get on the field.
Werner, what enabled him to become a starter?
Well, I'll tell you, he's made quite an ascension, right? You saw him kind of grow up on the special teams last year. And that's, the history and tradition of this program. That's how it's been. Guys have made their name on special teams and then continued that ascension, and he did just that. He had a great spring. He really, really worked hard to change his body, to mature his body, and he's a much bigger man now than he was as a freshman. And I think with every rep he gains valuable experience, he's getting better and better and better. So, his arrow is certainly pointed up.
Front row right, Austin.
Hey, Greg, Austin Ward from Letterman Row. Also, just to stick with those linebackers, when do you all expect Tough 401 to be back? We saw him participate just in those 2 open practices. It seemed like he might miss the whole season, but when do you think he might be back now?
He may be back this week. You know, it's amazing the way he has rehabbed, the job that our people in the training room, our medical people have handled him, the way Coach Mick has handled him. And more important than any of that is the way that Tough is such a committed young man to what he's doing. And he's made incredible progress. As a coach and as a father, I kind of am hesitant because that's a serious injury, as you know. But you know, you have to trust the medical people, and if they say he can go. So we'll see. You know, by the end of the week, we'll figure out what he can and can't do or what he should or shouldn't do. But he's ahead of schedule, well ahead of schedule.
Dating back to the spring, you guys said the other safety spot was the biggest concern, maybe on the whole team. Is that still the case for you? Are you uncertain going into week 1? Has Isaiah claimed that job? Where do you sit there opposite Jordan Fuller?
Well, I think it's been a great competition, which has raised both Isaiah and Jossen's game. They're both going to play. And if you remember last year when we started the season with Jordan and Eric, right, they both played, and then Jordan pulled away and became the starter and became a really fine starter, as we know. So I don't know if that'll happen or if all season long those 2 guys will go back and forth. But whatever happens, I've said this to you guys before, you can't make it happen. You got to let it happen. Now, you encourage and you coach and you teach, but at the end of the day, they have to go out there and play their way into a position.
Far left, Matt.
Matt McCoy, 157 is all. There have been so much stuff going on around the program. I'm just wondering, from your perspective, the guys during training camp, was they able to block out the outside stuff? What is your take of the kind of camp you had, given the unusual circumstances that
I thought we had an outstanding camp. I really do, and it's a testament to those players, our leadership first, and the whole squad. Having said that, certainly to block it out would be, you know, that would be not true. I mean, the guys have done their best to stay focused on the task at hand. And, you know, one of the things we talk about all the time around here is, you know, keep the main thing the main thing. You know, stick to what we're here to do. And you can't do anything about some of those other things that are happening outside right now. But what you can do is really grow as a team and grow as a player. College football is a little different, right? Training camp is the only time that we have their undivided attention. It's the only time all year long. They have academics. They have different social things going on. So training camp, they're ours. And it's critical. That's where your team is forged. That's where your personality, your team comes, your leadership. So it's not like you can do a do-over. You know, it happens once. You have those 3 weeks, and it has to happen. And I thought Ryan Day did an incredible job stepping into that role. Unbelievable. I think our coaching staff did, and most importantly, as I said, our players.
Front row, second row right. Rob?
Greg Rob, Columbus Dispatch. The events of the last, 4-6 weeks have sort of brought to light this idea of what are the responsibilities of a college coach. You've lived it. Rutgers, you were the head guy, and yet you were also in the NFL. You sort of share the nuances and really what the differences are there from you're over the entire program versus just football.
Well, as a college head football coach, you're responsible for a lot of things, a lot of people, and that's what you sign up for. That's part of the job that I really enjoy, is that you touch so many different people and you're able to help so many different people grow. But there's a great responsibility that comes with that. In the National Football League, it's a little different in that there's a general manager that has control of and responsibility for some things. You as the head coach have responsibility for some other things. And then just the fact that, you know, you're dealing with grown men, some, you know, in their 20s, some into their 30s. When I first started coaching the NFL, my first stint, I was 29 years old, and I was coaching people that were older than I. So it is, it's definitely different. The relationships you bond in college with the players is different because they're developing as young men. And it's incredible to see when you recruit a guy as a 15 or 16-year-old, and then you see him graduate as a 21, 22-year-old. It's like your own kids. I'm going through that now with my own children. That's the age group that mine are. And you just see it by the day, how they change and how they mature. And that's the thing that brought me back to college football, quite frankly, and the part I love most about it.
Follow real quick. Which job is more stressful, ultimately?
You know what I say is, in college football, it's a lifestyle. So if your family has, NFL is the way I put it to people. 6 months of the year, you work a normal job. So you go in, 7:30, 8, and you get home for dinner. College football, that's not the case. College football, your family better be part of it because there's not enough time to do both. There's recruiting, spring football, recruiting weekends. So, I heard Ryan say something about having his son around here. That's what I always tried to do because I know you can't have two things going. You have to make it one. Otherwise, it's hard to do justice to either.
Second row left, Lori.
Coach Irving always kind of downplayed his role in the defense. So, how are you defensively feeling his absence, if at all?
Well, I think, first of all, Coach kind of does that to be humble. He's involved in every facet of this program. But I think defensively, probably less than offensively, because that's where his specialty is. I think the biggest thing you miss is his leadership, the inspiration, the things he provides, not only the players, but the coaches. And, I always felt one of my biggest jobs as a head coach was to coach the coaches, because then that is exponential. That can spread throughout the team. Coach the coaches and really help the leaders lead, and that leaders meaning the players.
Ryan was very complimentary to the assistants you've given him. What do you feel like is the most valuable thing, the most valuable insight maybe that you've been able to provide him throughout this whole thing?
Well, we've talked a lot, and Ryan's only been here a year, and I've only been here going on my third year, so I didn't know Ryan before he came. We've gotten, I'd say in the last 30 days, a lot closer, and it's been neat because he's a special guy. He's got a bright, bright future. Probably be himself. We have a program here, and as Ryan has told our staff and told our players, he's holding the spot until Coach gets back. So we have a program, we have a philosophy, we have core values. We're sticking to the plan. But within the plan, there's daily decisions that must be made. And I told Ryan, listen, hear me out, hear Kevin out, but at the end of the day, you have to do what you feel comfortable with. Because your name now is in front of that program.
Front row right, Tim.
Tim May, Columbus Dispatch. Greg, what is the biggest mistake you made in your first game as a head coach that still sticks with you? You remember?
Oh, I remember it very clearly. We were at the University of Buffalo, which was a monster crowd, as you can imagine, right? Rutgers, Buffalo, we hadn't won forever. And I'm so excited to go coach the game, and I'm going to lead the team onto the field. And I'm standing in the tunnel waiting for them to say, go ahead. And I noticed that I don't have my call sheet or my game plan with me. So now an experienced head coach would call the assistant over and say, hey, do me a favor, go get the game plan in the locker room. But not having that experience, what did I do? I worked my way through the crowd, through the players, got it, sprinted up, and just as I got back, we were able to take the field on time. But that's what I remember. Thankfully, things calmed down a little, and we won that game. But, yeah, that's my recollection.
Was there a sense, though, going into that there were going to be decisions you have to make like that as the head coach? I mean, during the game, how do you prepare for that as opposed to just worrying about the defense or the offense?
I think certain guys, from the minute they get into this thing, are preparing to be a head coach. And that's just the way they're wired. And I think other guys are really great assistant coaches, and maybe someday they become head coaches or maybe they don't. From the day I started coaching, I knew I wanted to be a head coach. And I worked for some tremendous, legendary head coaches, both in high school and in college and in the NFL. And I constantly was studying them. And my high school coach, Mike Miello, who started me in this profession, he told me, you're going to go on and you're going to work for several people. Don't only write down the good things, but write down the things you wouldn't do. So I took that advice very seriously and was preparing the whole time.
As you've gotten ready for Oregon State, obviously Jonathan Smith's coming from Washington, that idea that they have plays, they don't have a scheme, things like that. But I don't know, is this an open book almost, or have you studied a lot of Washington, a lot of Colorado? Just how have you gotten ready defensively for this opener?
Well, we studied both. You know, we'd like to think that we have a system that can adapt within the game, and that's something that we constantly talk to our players about, is we'll go in with a blueprint, but we're not married to anything because we have a menu. We can use certain things. If they change, we can change. You know, I get a kick sometimes of the defensive coaches who say, you know, I don't care what they do, we dictate, and that's not true. They line up in a formation. We don't tell them how to line up, and then we have to react to that. So it starts with that, and it obviously goes much deeper. But I think that in games like this, new head coach, offensive head coach, has an offensive coordinator, so you really have to spend some double time studying both, but not marrying yourself to either. Because you may get a third, you may get a hybrid of both.
One last thing. Was there a moment in camp when it dawned on you that Ryan was up to this task? Because like you said, you know, he hasn't been named the head coach. I mean, he's filling a chair for now. But was there a moment when you just, you watched him and how he handled something and went, okay, he's doing all right? I mean, do you remember any kind of moment like that, or day, or?
I think it was the third. I think it was the third. I got that. I think it was the third day that he spoke with the team. He just said, "That's Ryan." The first 2 days he was trying to do the organizational, perfunctory things, and then when he spoke to the team, he spoke from his heart that third day, and from there on, that's the way he's been running the football team. And you know, I'd be remiss. I'm so impressed just working underneath and observing him and trying to help him, that I mean, he's got the it. You know, when you work on the other side of the ball, you really don't get to sit in the room with him very much and game plan and do all that stuff. So our relationship was more friends than professional, because we don't do a lot together professionally. Observing him over the last, whatever it is, 25 days, he's got the it.
Front row left. Doug?
Greg, in the linebacker room, among the other guys in that fight, like Keandre Jones, Justin Hilliard, are they still in that mix, just maybe a step below those other guys, or how do they fit in?
They really are. They're in. That's what I said. When we have tremendous depth, I didn't mention every guy, but they are in the mix. Justin Hilliard has just been a tremendous story for me. I love the kid, the way he has come back from injury and really worked himself into being a guy that we are very comfortable putting out on the field. And he's probably one of our top, I don't know, 2 or 3 special teams players on the entire team. So he'll play a ton of downs, whether they're defense or special teams, but he is ready to play defense. And then Keandre Jones, there may not be a harder working guy on our football team. And he's battled through some things. He's one of the toughest guys. And I know he has not been 100%, and he keeps going out. I think he's getting close now. And I'm anxious to see him be able to practice for a couple weeks where he's 100% and he's going without, having to avoid some different things. But he'll play a lot as well. So we are going to play. The young guys might not get, in the game, the newcomers, but they're very, very exciting to look at as well. They're really good players. So that room has, I think it's got a bright future, that room.
And is Werner or Browning the middle linebacker?
Barron's the middle linebacker.
Barron's the middle linebacker. The cornerback situation, are there 2 starters and then backups? Are there going to be 3 guys or 4 guys all rotating equally? How will that work out?
We'll stick to the 3-man rotation that we developed here a few years ago. I think the way we play, we play press coverage almost every down. And not only is it physically tiring, but it's mentally. Every down, this could be the one he's going deep, right? So, and those guys have done a great job. Kendall, Damon Arnett, and Jeff Okuda will be the 3 rotating. And we feel like we have at least 3 starters in that room. Again, that's a room that I'm getting more and more excited about every day, because we have some youth at the position as well that is getting better. And at this place, you better, because those corners tend to leave early. It's kind of been the formula around here. So we have to keep bringing those young guys up quickly, and they're doing that. So that's good.
At defensive end, will Nick Bosa and Chase Young get more snaps than the other guys? We know there was the big rotation last year. How will you guys work that out when you have, especially a guy like Bosa, who's an All-American?
Well, Nick will certainly get his share. You have to. He's a dominant football player, but Chase is an excellent player. Jonathan Cooper. I think those 3 will rotate, and then from there we'll see, Ja'Shawn Cornell and whoever else may get in the game at defensive end. But excited about that group. They have a chance to be special.
And then just the big picture, How much of, if you had to break it down, how much of being a head coach really is during the week, practice, training camp, game plan, culture, leadership, versus how much is the 3 hours on Saturday making decisions, making in-game adjustments? We know Urban's not going to be here for 3 games. I'm just trying to get a feel for how much he'll be missed on those Saturdays versus how much you miss the head coach with everything else in a program.
That's an interesting question because certainly when you're a head coach, you chart the vision of the program, and that's the number one thing. And then you help, you inspire and you equip people to carry out that vision. So that's a big, big job. But you can't underscore game day either, because you work, you do all that for those 12 Saturdays, and hopefully then the 13th, 14th, 15th. So I do think that decisions on game day are critical because all that work goes into, it can come down to that 1 4th and 1, or that, do we throw it or run it, or do we blitz or lay back? And so that can't be underscored either. So I think it's a combination. And I think when you talk generically about head coaches, it's different. Some guys are very involved in the game day decisions. Some guys are kind of hands off and only make, 1 or 2 big decisions a game. Other guys are very involved. So it depends what kind of head coach you are, and we'll miss him in both.
Which was Urban?
He's not. He lets people do their job, but he has an opinion and he discusses it with it. I think he's very reasonable about how he handles decision making on game day. A lot of them are made before we ever get to that stadium, but there's always one. People say, "Well, we'll make them all before." You can't. Things come up that. But what he does is able to stay in the moment, and that's what we preach to our team. Win the moment. He's able to stay in the moment and talk to his assistants, and then make the final decision.
Folks, we're going to kind of speed this up because we got to wrap this up. I want everybody to get at least their one last question. So have your best question, front row left. Bill?
Bill Landis from Cleveland.com. Greg, are you guys comfortable with Barron playing middle linebacker and outside? And what does a healthy, tough Borland mean for Barron when he's back in that mix? I know you're going to rotate, but Barron just seems like a guy that needs to be on the field in some capacity. How might his role change when Tuck comes back?
You know what? We're not going to deal with that right now. I think we got to just make sure that Barron's ready to go at the middle to this week. Barron's a talented guy. He can play any of the 3, but it's not as easy as just say, "Oh, jump over there and play." There's different jobs, assignments, rules. So what we've done though is we've trained him in both positions at different times. So I think he has a background in both. But right now it's all about one game, Oregon State, and Barron will be in the middle.
Ryan was saying he's going to call plays from the sideline. I don't think he's done that here, and I don't know if he's done it before. You obviously have extensive experience on the other side of the ball, obviously. But how much do you anticipate you'll be helping him on the sideline, just in sort of that kind of things, communicating with officials, just like the normal things that a head coach has to do on a sideline that are going to be unfamiliar to him?
I think I'll do it pretty much the same way I did with Coach Meyer. I mean, we were constantly in communication, he and I. If there was, no-brainer penalties we never talked about, but if there's things that, there was things to weigh and what would be, we always talked about it. How did it affect the defense? How did it affect the offense? So we'd have a 3 or 4-way conversation going. But again, it's the head coach's job to make the final decision. You can take the information, and oftentimes you have to take that information and make a decision in about 12 seconds, right? It's not like you have an hour to think about it. So that's what Ryan will do, and that's where I'm here to help him. That's where Kevin's here to help him, and our whole staff is.
Second row middle, Taylor.
Coach Taylor Ashbrook, EBS Online. I know Taver spent the spring with you guys, but that seems to be, a very interesting coaching change there, going from a high-energy guy like Carey to, what's the energy difference between him and Taver? Does Taver have different techniques that he teaches than Coach Combs, or how do those guys differ, I guess, in a spot where you've got to replace 3 starters yet again for the second straight year?
Well, that seems to be replace the starters has kind of been the theme. But if you've ever seen, I know haven't had a chance to see a lot of them here, but you ever see him at the end of practice, Taver Johnson is sweated through his gear from head to toe. I mean, that guy runs around the field. So the energy that's provided is off the charts. Now, we know, I don't know if anyone can ever hit Coach Combs' level of energy, right? That's caffeine 2.0, but Tavers, he's right there. Technique-wise, there's certain things, every coach has a comfort zone that they like to deal in. And just like we talked about earlier with Alex, Tavers brought some ideas into our defensive staff room. That's why change, although it's sad to lose buddies and lose the chemistry that you have, change is good. And as a head coach, I never was scared of that when guys moved on to different jobs, because you bring new people in, they bring new ideas in. The only thing that has to happen is it has to fit into the philosophy of the program that you're joining. And we always gain, good ideas and good techniques and motivational things, and Tavers provided that, just as Alex has.
Fourth row, right, Aaron?
Aaron Goldstein, Spectrum Sports. Coach, in the 26 days since Irwin was placed on administrative leave, have you or any other coaching staff had any chance to interact with him at all, whether you're reaching out to him or he reached out to you, and what have those interactions been like?
Well, Urban is, before he's my boss, he's a friend. I've known him for over 20 years. So when I was allowed to, I did communicate, and that's personal. It wasn't about football. It was about him, because I was worried about him. I'll leave it at that.
Front row, right, Dom?
Coach Dom Taveri, 10 TV. Sometimes adversity brings a football team closer. Have you seen any of that, and what do you expect to see on Saturday?
Well, I think you're right on that, Dom, and I think we've all seen that in all different walks of life. But I think what it did in this instance is our leadership, which was really good. I think they would have, if Coach Meyer was here, they would have led in a very, very good way. But I think they really stepped it up. You're sitting where Johnny Dixon sits in special teams, and I can just picture Johnny and Terry and Paris. I mean, you're talking about three great leaders. And they acted like grown men. And I mean, grown men not only holding others accountable, but teaching younger guys. And I'm sure they would have done it to a degree anyway, but I think, like Ryan has talked to all of us about, we all had to step up our game a little bit. And I think our leadership has done that, and I think the adversity has brought that out.
Have you ever been on a team where 3 receivers were captains? Because you often think of receivers as those guys out on the edge, so to speak.
Right. No, I've never been. You're right. It's, oftentimes the further you get away from the ball, you're right. They're on the edge is a good way to put it. They're out there. I don't know if you meant it that way, but they are. They're out there on the edge, and they don't deal with the others very much. They deal with themselves, and so it is unique, but I think it's a testament to the work ethic those guys provide year-round. You talk to Mick. They're unbelievable, the way they train, the way they carry themselves, and well-deserved. I think our captains really are. We have 7 great captains. I think we have, that's not the end of the leadership on this team. We have a lot of other guys that are good leaders as well.
Last 2 individuals, front row, middle. Dave?
Greg, Dave Biddle with 24/7 Sports and Bucknuts. Just for some quick clarity on Tough Borland's injury, it was a torn Achilles, is that correct, in the spring? And you hope, go ahead.
I don't know if we do that here. I've been different places where I am allowed to say it, I'm not allowed to say it, so.
It's a lower ankle injury, but whatever was reported back in the spring, we'll go with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Urban called it an Achilles injury. I just didn't know if it was a torn Achilles. But,
okay.
But you said it was a tough injury. You expect to have him back, you said maybe as early as this week or maybe sometime this month, just.
Yeah, as early as this week. Yeah, I think one of the hardest things is going to be to hold him back. If you know Tough at all, he is a laser-focused guy, and he's put that laser focus on his recovery and getting ready to play. We're going to be smart, though.
And final question, back row, middle, Steve?
Yeah, Coach, the change in the freshman rule to allow the guys to play up to 4 games and still keep their red shirt, how much does that kind of factor into your thinking going into these first couple games? And if you can, on your side of the ball, do you have 3, 4, 5 freshmen who you are pretty positive are going to play in this game?
Well, I think that the rule you're mentioning, I don't know if everybody's aware, you can play in 4 games at any time in the season and still maintain your eligibility to have another year. And that's a huge change. And I think there's a lot of strategic thinking that should go into it. I'm not sure everywhere that's happening, but it is here. Because what happens oftentimes at the end of the year is you get into a situation, game 8, 9, 10, or 11, 12, 13, or 14, 15, where you could really use guys, number one, from a health standpoint, and number two, they're a totally different player than when they showed up